Relations between Turkey and Israel have somehow deteriorated even further. Turkish President Recep Erdoğan recently warned that Israel's attacks on Syria and Lebanon also threaten Turkey, while his interior minister said that he hoped to one day see the liberation of Jerusalem. Israel's foreign minister, meanwhile, accused the Turkish government of working to drag Turkey back into a dark and backward era. And earlier this year, former Israeli PM Naftali Bennett labelled Turkey the new Iran, sparking claims in Turkish media that Turkey was Israel's next target. Since the October 7th attack, Turkey has emerged as one of the most strident critics of Israel for its devastation of Gaza and its invasions and attacks on Syria and Lebanon. The war of words comes as both Israel and Turkey seek to expand their influence in the region, eyeing the role of regional hegemon in a post-American Middle East. So in this video, we're going to explain the dire state of Turkey-Israel relations, why tensions are heating up further, and whether some kind of conflict could break out between the two rivals. Contrary to Trump's original talk of regime change, the war in Iran apparently cemented the Iranian regime's grip on power. In the latest issue of our magazine, we explain how this happened, and why it's too early to be pessimistic about the future of Iran. That's just one of the 80 pages in the magazine, because there's more to Too Long than you'd expect. Purchase your copy by clicking the link in the description. Turkey was actually the first Muslim-majority country to recognize Israeli sovereignty in 1949. But following decades of ups and downs, by the early 2010s, the relationship was at a real low, following the 2008-2009 Gaza war and Israel's deadly raid of a Turkish aid flotilla in 2010. By 2022, though, the relationship rebounded, with full diplomatic ties restored, and Turkey eyeing joint energy projects with Israel in the Mediterranean. Relations were at a relative high point, but this was short-lived, as relations collapsed amid the Gaza war. Turkey's Erdoğan cut trade ties with Israel, has accused the country of committing genocide against Palestinians, backed the South African case against Israel at the ICJ, and described Hamas as freedom fighters. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has in turn labelled Erdoğan an antisemitic dictator, who is the last person who should lecture the state of Israel on morality. Behind this war of words, though, it's essentially a tug-of-war between two would-be regional hegemons. In a region where the geopolitical balance of power has dramatically shifted in the past few years, both Israel and Turkey see an opportunity to fill the vacuum left by a weakened Iran and an unpredictable US that apparently imagines a reduced role for itself in the Middle East. Syria is perhaps the most prominent battleground where these competing visions are at odds. The collapse of the Assad regime in late 2024 was a pivotal moment in the transition to a new regional order, and both Israel and Turkey have sought to consolidate their influence in a post-Assad Syria. Turkey, a close ally of the new Syrian government, led by President Ahmed al-Sharaa, has carved out a dominant role in Syria's post-war, post-Assad reconstruction. Erdoğan's desired outcome of a strong, stable Syria, unified under an al-Sharaa government, is the polar opposite of Israel's. Israel has been deeply suspicious of al-Sharaa since his ascendancy, given his Islamist roots, and has moved quickly to capitalize on Assad's downfall. After the Assad regime's collapse, Israel sees strategic territory in southern Syria, where it plans to stay indefinitely, and from where it has launched regular incursions deeper into Syria. The Israeli military has struck both militant targets and Syrian government infrastructure, justifying the attacks by saying they're designed to protect Druze civilians. Beyond Gaza and Syria, Turkey's condemned Israel's invasion and occupation of southern Lebanon too. Additionally, seeking to boost their own regional power and influence while countering the others, both Israel and Turkey have sought out alliances. Israel has turned to Cyprus and Greece, adding a European dimension to the feud. Together, they've stepped up trilateral cooperation in energy, relating to natural gas in the eastern Mediterranean, as well as defense, with joint exercises and Greece and Cyprus purchasing advanced Israeli weapon systems. For Turkey, this Israeli outreach is particularly troubling. Despite Turkey and Greece officially being NATO allies, there's a deep-seated mutual suspicion and tense disputes over territorial claims in the Aegean Sea. And of course, Cyprus remains split between the Greek Cypriot south and Turkish Cypriot north. Turkey, meanwhile, has looked east and south to the likes of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, boosting its economic, military, and security ties. It's also backed initiatives designed to boost non-Israeli regional integration. For example, Turkey and Saudi Arabia recently signed an agreement for a railway linking the two countries via Syria and Jordan, ultimately aiming at extending to Oman, a move seen by Israel as an attempt to curb Israeli influence in east-west trade corridors. And rhetorically, things have been heating up in recent weeks. Why? Well, for Turkey, it may be a question of trying to exploit perceived tensions between the US and Israel, largely over Iran and Lebanon. Against the backdrop of reports of a heated Trump-Netanyahu phone call, Trump has had some nice things to say about Erdoğan, saying, "I like him," and describing him as a very good friend and a great leader. Trump's respect for Erdoğan has been demonstrated by the fact that the Turkish leader has seemingly been spared the wrath that Trump has directed at European and NATO leaders who failed to back his war in Iran. Furthermore, with Iran weakened, Erdoğan rhetorically upping the ante on Israel might be an attempt to boost Turkey's standing with the Arab world, in order to position itself as a key centre of influence in the region, one that's capable of keeping Israel in check. For Israeli politicians, rhetorically establishing Turkey as a threat to Israel can be seen within the context of the looming Israeli election, at which governing and opposition parties alike are attempting to sell themselves as the strongest on security. This is an argument that Bobby Ghosh makes in foreign policy. Naftali Bennett, the former PM running again for the top job, quote, needs a threat to run against, hence his blunt labelling of Turkey as the new Iran. As for Netanyahu, it's pretty well established now that Netanyahu sees war, or the perpetual threat of war, as central to his political survival. Similarly, Ghosh argues that the narrative helps to justify the so-called hexagon alliance architecture that Netanyahu is seeking to build, with the likes of Greece, Cyprus, India, and others, to counter what he calls the emerging radical Sunni axis, i.e. Turkey and friends, as well as the Iran-led radical Shia axis. But does this mean that Israel and Turkey are heading for conflict? Well, we see that as an unlikely outcome. While rhetorical clashes might be beneficial to both parties, it's hard to see how actual military confrontation would be beneficial. Furthermore, both Israel and Turkey are unusually connected. They are, of course, both US allies, with Turkey also a NATO member, another fact that disincentivizes actual conflict. And both are on good terms with Azerbaijan too, providing them with a helpful diplomatic backchannel. For what it's worth, Trump has said that he doesn't think anything will actually happen between Turkey and Israel while he's president, because of his mutual respect with Erdoğan. However, heightened tensions, increasingly hostile rhetoric, and geopolitical competition raises the risk of miscalculation and unintended consequences. The latest issue of our magazine is out now, and if you want our best value ever, subscribing and using code SUMMER26 gets you your first copy for as cheap as £4.99, as well as 20% off as long as you stay subscribed. I told you about one of the articles at the start of this video, but this issue is truly jam-packed with content from all around the world. Obviously, the headline section is our rundown of Trump's wars around the world, discussing all of the different countries and regions that have faced Trump's military wrath, going nation by nation through our timeline, and reaching the ultimate question, has Trump created the modern holy war? From there, we dive into our regional sections, starting with the UK, where we unpack the results of the recent elections, take a look at the UK's odd foreign posture, and discuss if Britain has become ungovernable. Then in our EU section, we discuss how Russia's sphere of influence is fading, while Europe's energy transition isn't what you'd expect, as well as looking at the Euro's missing members. Finally, in the global section, we discuss whether we're seeing echoes of the First World War, what's next for Iran, as well as what really came from the Gen Z protests we saw emerging last year. That's not even everything. With this 80-page issue, our joint longest ever, there's even more to read than I've been able to mention here. So click the link in the description to learn more and grab your copy today.